I've had a journey, I've come out the other end of that journey, and I've still got a long journey ahead of me. And I'm more than happy to face every challenge on that journey as it goes. Hi there guys, my name's Alastair and I've done this video today to talk to you about the Give 'em Hope campaign. I'm now 33, I was originally born and raised in Australia. I lived in a rural township. Not one of the typical ones you'd see with a farmstead everywhere, but it was quite a lot of farmland, it was quite a lot of open space, and it was a very small community as such. For me it was quite a comfortable lifestyle. It was almost a stereotypical lifestyle. 2.4 children, nice big house, growing up in the summertime and enjoying myself. And I went to school, as you do, with a group of friends. I started school, I made a group of friends, and we seemed to stick together for quite a while. As time progresses, kids come in, kids go out, people moved around, and I carried on with the same group of friends. We moved on to high school, and high school is obviously the point when life sort of takes that change for a lot of people. Everybody starts coming into their own, people start developing their own feelings and start realising who in life they are. And for me that was the different part. That was me then realising that there was something slightly different about me that I didn't see in my friends around me. Growing up, I'd never had a feeling of fear of homosexuality or a feeling that my family wasn't interested or disagreed with it. But somewhere deep down in my psyche, something must have been there for me to think and believe that the way I was expected to grow up was to grow up, get married and have children. It just seemed that I was expected to have the heterosexual lifestyle. Feelings started becoming different in high school, and through a series of mistakes or little errors or experimentation, friends started sort of finding out something was different about me. It resulted in a lot of ribbing, never really any violence, but I suppose that was the close kinship I had with my friends. They looked after me more than anything else, but they took the piss quite a lot. And that put those steps back that you really don't need at a time when it's becoming yourself. Going back to what I said originally, you've got to bear in mind this is small rural Australia in the 80s and the 90s. At the time I was in a school where I was the only, I felt I was the only one, and it was a very white environment, it was a very enclosed Christian type environment. We only had one Aboriginal at the school. So we seemed to be quite a stereotypical, you will conform, this is how everybody's expected to be. So it's quite hard for me at the time to sort of understand who I was. My parents split up and I moved to an area which was completely the opposite. I moved to an area that had predominantly been an Aboriginal area in a different state in Australia, and at one stage I was the only white kid in my English class. So again the tables had turned there. I'd gone from being such a stereotypical environment to an environment where I was the minority in a visible way and instead of the non-visible way. But by that stage I'd grown up a little more, I'd matured a bit more, and I was starting to come into myself. I understood who I was, but I still wasn't really accepting of it. I finished school earlier than I should have done. I chose to leave earlier than having completed it. So I got quite far and I just thought I've had enough of school now. It's time to start making my own way in the world. For my 18th birthday, my dad said to me, he said, do you want a car or do you want a holiday? And I thought to myself, if I'm going to let my dad buy me a car, it's going to be a piece of shit. I'll take the holiday, thanks Dad. My mum and my sister had been in the UK for a year visiting family, and I hadn't seen the family since I was 6 years old. I thought, this will be my chance, I want to travel. I could have gone anywhere. I could have gone to Thailand, I could have gone to Bali, I could have gone to America. I chose to come to little old England and visit the family, and I came out here for my 18th birthday. At the time I'd left school, I was looking for work in Australia. I came out here for a holiday, for a break, and I realised there was more opportunity for me out here. Surprisingly, Australia being such a big and vast country, there isn't actually that much there because it is so sparsely populated. So over here in the UK, I realised I could get work a lot easier. Because it was more condensed over here, it was a lot easier to hide as well. Living in rural Australia, in a small township, everybody really knows your business. So me trying to come into myself wasn't as practical in Australia as it was out here in the UK. So I came out to the UK at 18 and I extended my ticket that my dad had bought me for a bit, and I did a bit of work. I spoke to family members and I told them I tried to join the forces in Australia, hadn't been successful. I then was convinced by my uncle to try the forces in the UK. I'd originally gone for the Navy. I'd lived in a naval background, family had been in the Navy, and it was a Navy area I grew up in as well, or was living in Australia. And so I applied for the British Navy, or the Royal Navy. I hadn't lived in the country long enough. I'd literally been in England for a week, 2 weeks, before going into the recruiting office. And they told me I needed to have been resident in the country for 3 years. Applied for the Air Force. The Army just seemed too much like running around and hard work for me. So I applied for the Air Force next. Same thing, 3 years. I wasn't prepared to wait that long. I was young, I was dealing with growing up. I just wanted to have everything done now. My teenage years were over and I was an adult. I wanted to feel like an adult and I wanted to do things my way. I was impatient. And I then, as the RAF said no to me, an army sergeant was walking behind and said, "Yep, we'll have you." It wasn't an issue to the army. Whilst I was going through my application to join the army, I was living at my cousin's house, and I decided one day, there was a sex shop in the town I lived in, I kept walking past it and decided one day, I'm 18 years old now, I'm legal, I might as well go in and have a look. And I plucked up the courage and I went in. I was actually really quite nervous about it. Having grown up in a small rural town in Australia, you don't really see things like that, so this was, to me, was a whole new experience. And being myself, I was drawn instantly to the gay section. And I looked at magazines, I looked at videos, I looked at toys. These things were bizarre creatures, you know, these were horrendous inventions that I suddenly come across. A lot of it was quite terrifying and quite intimidating. But in the end I had some money and I ended up buying some magazines. Took them back home and, you know, they sort of became my possession, that this was me coming into myself. I'd finally started to accept within myself that I was gay. I had a little spin on it though. There was, deep within my subconscious still, the way I'd been brought up and the way that the family were treating me in England and the foreview of me applying to join the army was all going against how I was feeling. It was just constantly being pressurised onto me that it was wrong, that it wasn't allowed, that it was illegal. In fact, it was illegal to join the army as a homosexual man when I joined. So my spin on it was I'd convinced myself I was bisexual. I felt I could have had a relationship with a woman, I felt I could have had sex with a woman, but I was attracted to men, and I would have much rather a man. I bought these magazines, and they were found at one stage as well, and my cousin was quite liberal about it. She really wasn't that fussed, but she accidentally slipped to an aunt of mine who wasn't so liberal, who was more stuffy, more Christian about things, more uptight. And she sat me down and had a word with me. It was a very one-sided conversation, explaining how disappointed they were in me, how I'd let her down, how I was a bad influence, and the ultimatum of it was, sort your life out, get rid of these dirty magazines, because if Grandma were to find out, it would probably give her a heart attack. So I was being blackmailed into being somebody I wasn't. I was being blackmailed into being something I wasn't. I was being blackmailed into somebody I didn't want to be. I couldn't wait to get into the army and get away from that environment. Ignoring the fact with homosexuality laws in the army, I just wanted to get away and I wanted to be me. And I'd lived in the closet long enough by then. I was more than happy to carry on staying in the closet. My life was going to be my life, and I was going to lead it how I wanted to, with my own private life being my own private life. I finally joined the army. I got into training and I joined the army. I remember going through the recruiting process and the army actually trying to catch you out at the recruiting phase as to whether you were homosexual or not. You sit through a series of interviews, and at one of the interviews they ask you all about yourself and your personal life. and they asked me if I had a girlfriend. I said I hadn't, and then it was straight off the back of that question, the recruiting sergeant asked me, do you have a boyfriend? And I said, no, I don't. And he actually picked me up for being blasé about the question. The army was at a time where they were trying to get rid of homosexuality. They felt it was incompatible with military life and military lifestyle, so they didn't even want to allow homosexuals in. But I still felt within myself, I'd convinced myself by this stage that I could pass myself off as bisexual. I got through it, you know, there was no issue there with that. They let me through. He didn't feel, once I'd explained my blasé attitude towards the answering the question, then emphasising to him the fact, or him asking me questions, do you think you would ever have a relationship with a man? I turned around and said, well, no. At the time, no, I wouldn't have. At the time, I wasn't ready for a relationship with anybody. I felt I was comfortable around these people. I felt these people were friends, and very trustworthy friends, and friends I would lay my life on the line for, which is an ethos of the army anyway. However, by their language and some of their actions, I still felt that it just wasn't time to come out. I completed training and went to a unit based in Hampshire at the time, and I started my military life, and that was in 1999. The laws changed for homosexuality in the army in 2000. After a series of cases where people who had served quite high ranks and quite a long period of time had been found out as being gay and had been kicked out of the armed forces, they took it to the Strasbourg Human Rights Tribunal, and the army did an about turn on their policies. And they came up with a brilliant policy. You are allowed to openly serve as a gay male or female, and you will be treated with the same rights as any other soldier. You are accepted in a civil partnership in the same as you are accepted in a marriage. And it was a change overnight. But that still wasn't enough for me at the time. I, by that stage, had become so indoctrinated with the army and so indoctrinated with my peer group and the way of behaving like a soldier that I still convinced myself of this bisexuality, and it was still expected of me to have a relationship with a girl, get married and have children. And that's what I went and did. I met a girl in 2000 and I got her pregnant. By my strong Christian valued upbringing, I was expected then to marry this woman. So eventually we had a son and we got married. And at the time I said to myself, well, I have now committed myself to this one person. I will, as the marriage dictates, I will commit myself to this one person. I was happy with that for a time. I carried on serving in the army. I was married. We'd had a son together. She had already had a daughter, and we went on to have a further 2 children. So I'm a father of 4 now, and I carried on this, I don't want to call it a fake life, because it wasn't a fake life. I was happy at times. I was a dad, I was a husband, I had a house, we had a life, and I enjoyed it. But it wasn't all that it was cracked up to be. And eventually the marriage broke down. There was various other reasons apart from the sexuality issue. However, you know, in the end we decided to make our way apart, and we made our way apart. We are better friends now than we were husband and wife, because as soon as she realised that I was still going to be there for the children, and there was nothing going to stand in my way of being a father to my children, there was nothing going to stand in my way to spending time with them. Once she realised that, she was happy with that. And so she accepted me as I am now, which was the first biggest hurdle to get over. So I've already spoken now. I've spoken to you and I've explained a bit about myself and who I am on my journey. Everybody has a journey, and how you choose to carry that journey out and where you want that journey to end is entirely up to you. One of my old sergeants always used to say, only person who can tell you no is yourself. My coming out was a bit of a multi-stage event, and I think a lot of people find that coming out is a multi-stage event anyway. Once you've told a group of people, when you discover a new group of people, you have to tell them all over again.